It is 8:08 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the 22nd day of August 2025, and this is episode 1153 of Bitcoin. And Powell has switched to a dovish tone. And he did that this morning at the Jackson Hole, Wyoming retreat, or whatever it is that they do with the Federal Reserve in the United States. And he signaled that it's possible that they may be trimming rate cuts. We'll get into it. And then we're going to talk about China and their stablecoin. And we'll see. We'll see, because there's an interesting development in the way China's approaching their stablecoin. And yes, it's not a CBDC. They're talking about their own stablecoin, but well, we'll get into it. I think it's really interesting. And speaking of CBDCs, the United States House of Representatives is slipping a CBDC ban into a bill, and we'll get into all of that. Then BitChat is freaking out, or rather, it's blowing up, and people are freaking out about it. There are a plethora of tools that are starting to be built around Jack Dorsey's BitChat. I mean ancillary stuff, whole websites that are connecting to BitChat. It's an ecosystem that is growing like a jungle. So we're going to want to probably say a few words about that. And then Coinbase, they've got a problem with their workforce in as North Korean people are, threatening the remote workers, I guess. And then the Philippines are about to do something interesting, and that should end up the day and round out the week. This week, I think it's the 34th week of the year. We'll just go ahead and go back and talk about Jerome Powell. He did the thing. People were begging for it. Trump was begging for it. Trump was threatening Jerome Powell to do it. And it looks like Jerome Powell may actually do the deed. Powell put September rate cut in play. And Bitcoin, along with everything else, pushes way higher. Stephen Alfer is writing this one for CoinDesk. Perhaps surprising markets, which had expected a hawkish tone, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell firmly put a September rate cut on the table today. Speaking at the Kansas City Fed's Economic Symposium in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Powell said that the shifting balance of risks may warrant adjusting policy. Quote, "Downside risks to employment are rising," said Powell. "If those risks materialize, they can do so quickly in the form of sharply higher layoffs and rising unemployment." End quote. Bitcoin has gained about 2% since the remarks hit the wires, rising to 114,200, and it's well past 116,000 right now. We'll have to see if it holds, but let's continue. U.S. stocks have added more than 1%, and the 10-year Treasury yield is lower by 6 basis points to 4.27%. The dollar index has dipped around 0.5%, and gold is higher by about 0.6. In anticipation that Powell would remain hawkish, risk markets, crypto among them, had been under sizable pressure in the days leading up to his address, touching a record high of just above 124,000 about a week ago, alongside September rate cut expectations that had risen to nearly 100%. Bitcoin has slumped nearly 10% to 112,000 as those monetary easing hopes quickly dwindled to just 69% in the hours ahead of Powell's speech. In the minutes following, those odds have risen to nearly 90% per CME FedWatch. The correction in the perhaps more speculative Ether, and honestly, I don't give a shit about Ether. In traditional markets, the NASDAQ dipped 3% over the past few days as it too priced in lessening chances of a rate cut. So he did the thing. He said the words. He's appeased the people. And now all we have to do is wait till September and see what they actually do. Because just because Fed Chairman Jerome Powell decided to say the words does not mean it's going to happen. So just please, everybody remain calm. Everybody remain calm, and let's move over to China. Don't expect China's stablecoin to touch the mainland. Let me repeat that. Don't expect China's stablecoin to touch the mainland. And they're talking about mainland China. What have I been saying about United States stablecoins? Designed specifically to export debt, an eye-watering amount of freshly printed debt instrumentation, but not really going to be touching the United States. Now, that could change because Circle is interior in the United States, and they seem to have a mandate to kind of mess around with stablecoins inside the United States. And Tether themselves has hired Bo Hines to get Tether into the United States. So I may be a little jumping the gun a little bit on my expectations that we're going to print an inordinate amount of debt and we're going to export it all across the world and none of it will touch the United States. I could be wrong. I still don't think I am. I think it would be I just think it's going to be different if we do get Tether completely regulated inside the United States for internal usage. I somehow or another think it's going to be somehow separate. But China may be planning to do the same thing. Let's find out here in Cointelegraph from Johan Yun. The cryptocurrency industry is abuzz with speculation after recent reports suggested China may soften its stance on a yuan-backed stablecoin, but law experts caution against overinterpreting the news. Reuters reported Wednesday that Beijing is considering approving a stablecoin pegged to the renminbi as part of a roadmap to boost the currency's internationalization. It was the second report this month following a similar Financial Times story on August the 5th. Despite the news, Chinese officials have yet to confirm whether it's considering a stablecoin push. Even if Chinese authorities move ahead, analysts stress that such a stablecoin would almost certainly circulate offshore, not in the mainland. Quote, the news about stablecoins linked to China's currency is likely genuine, but it's not what most people assume. China is unlikely to issue stablecoins onshore, but we can expect them offshore, Joshua Chu, co-chair of the Hong Kong Web3 Association, told Cointelegraph. China's currency operates in two distinct markets: the onshore yuan, the CNY, and the offshore yuan, the CNH. And any stablecoin initiative would likely be tied to the latter. China's currency has been deliberately split into CNY and CNH. The CNY is strictly confined to the mainland, and it's not a currency that moves freely in and out of China. A stablecoin pegged to the CNY would clash with Beijing's strict capital control rules. The CNH and CNY are the same currency, but their prices can diverge because they trade in different markets. Simply put, if overseas markets are bearish on China, the CNH can weaken more than the CNY. If there's strong foreign demand for Chinese assets, CNH can trade more strongly than CNY. A similar effect known as the kimchi premium is seen in South Korea's Bitcoin market, where BTC often trades at a premium due to the country's confined crypto markets. Previous reports suggest China's internet giants have lobbied to greenlight the offshore yuan stablecoin. Within the domestic market, Beijing has been committed to the digitization of its CNY through the development of its central bank digital currency, the digital yuan, also known as the eCNY. Winston Ma, an adjunct professor at law at New York University, and former managing director of the sovereign wealth fund China Investment Corporation's North America's office, said that if Beijing were to consider a CNY stablecoin, it would have to work alongside the CBDC. Quote, within mainland China, the government push of sovereign CBDC via both state bank channels and mobile payment interfaces shows no sign of slowing down, Ma said Cointelegraph. Quote, in the mainland market, any stablecoin trial would most likely be integrated with existing CNY, which has already been tested by hundreds of millions of Chinese users in numerous transactional contexts. In June of 2010, Beijing expanded its cross-border RMB trade settlement to 20 provinces and all foreign counterparties, a move that triggered the rise of Hong Kong's offshore CNH market. Hong Kong quickly grew into the largest liquidity pool for CNH. It pioneered the issuance of the dim sum bonds denominated in offshore yuan and became the primary value for CNH-based trading. Other centers, such as London and Singapore, have since developed their own markets. The city also serves as a policy bridge. It allows Chinese authorities to test the internationalization of the yuan while keeping the onshore CNY market under strict control. And at the same time, Hong Kong provides a legal framework for cryptocurrency trading, with exchanges able to apply for licenses that remain unavailable on the mainland. Authorities have even reportedly used the city as a venue to liquidate confiscated crypto holdings. That bridge now extends into stablecoins. On August the 1st, Hong Kong's new stablecoin rules took effect, requiring issuers to obtain a license. The rollout followed Washington's own push for stablecoin dominance under the Genius Act, a federal framework reinforcing the U.S. dollar's primacy. Quote, most likely, China's stablecoin experiment will be in Hong Kong, which is in a unique position to test both CBDCs and stablecoins related to the Chinese renminbi. Chinese academics have repeatedly warned that dollar-backed stablecoins pose a threat to the yuan. In June, two scholars writing in China Economic Times argued that the growth of Tether's USDT risks eroding China's financial autonomy. Okay, so now we're getting into the weaponization phase of stablecoins. Boy, that escalated quickly. Anyway, the same concern was echoed this week by Zhang Monan, deputy head of the Institute of American and European Studies at the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, who said that the Genius Act will reinforce dollar dominance. But, she added that Hong Kong's stablecoin rules open the possibility for a yuan-pegged token to challenge the dominance if ever permitted. For now, the onshore CNY remains under capital control, leaving little room for any stablecoin that competes with the eCNY. Offshore CNH, with Hong Kong as its testing ground, is the far more likely candidate. However, a stablecoin pegged to the CNH may not match global volumes, argues Chu, as the offshore yuan market is relatively small compared to the onshore market. China's broad money supply stood at 329.94 trillion yuan, which is about $45 trillion at the end of July. By comparison, Hong Kong's offshore yuan deposit pool was just 0.8 trillion yuan by the end of June, barely 0.27% of the mainland supply. Quote, with Hong Kong's stablecoin ordinance now active, a CNH-backed stablecoin is very likely. However, its scale, to the disappointment of some crypto bros, may not match larger global stablecoins. Well, whatever. With dollar-backed coins controlling nearly all of the sector, Chu interprets China's stablecoin push as less about chasing retail crypto demand and more about carving out strategic space for its currency in an increasingly digital financial system. In that sense, Beijing's stablecoin experiment looks less like a controlled pilot in Hong Kong and more like a way to extend the yuan's reach without loosening its grip at home. So that's the article. Nowhere in that article does it suggest that China is about to crank up their own money printers and export that debt to other countries like I think is going to happen with the United States. In fact, this Cointelegraph article is rather persuasive that that's not the intention that China is looking for. China approaches their currency in a completely different way than the United States and pretty much all of the Western nations do. They've separated their currencies. If it's in China, they're using the CNY. If it's anywhere else in the world, it's the CNH. And this has always been quite puzzling to me. And now I'm starting to, I kind of get it. But before stablecoins, that kind of system, yeah, sure. It works. It works for them. I mean, they're a big enough country that they'd be able to do it. They basically build all of the crap that ends up in United States and the Western countries' landfills because it's just cheap Chinese garbage. But they do build it. They do build most of it. Most of the stuff we buy does, in fact, come from China. Given that, having separate currencies for onshore and offshore usage as a way to regulate capital controls does make sense. But it's not going to make sense very much longer. And I get the gut feeling, that it's going to hinder and hamper China going forward now that we have the advent of stablecoins that are pegged to, in our case, pegged to the dollar. In their case, it would be pegged to the yuan, but it would only be pegged to the offshore yuan. I get the feeling that it's not going to work out the way that they think it's going to work out. I get the feeling that the landscape of the way that we view currencies, especially bifurcated currencies like the CNY and CNH, I think that landscape changes greatly and quickly, and I do not think it's going to do for China what China thinks it's going to do for them. And in fact, it may put them in a really, really bad situation. But again, as always, we got to wait and see how this shakes out. I mean, it could be good for them, but I honestly don't see how. I think it's going to be a confusing mess for everybody, but it's going to be especially confusing for people that have two separate sets of currencies for onshore and offshore usage. And the only people that I know that do that is China. So again, we'll wait and see. And while we're waiting, you might as well go ahead and get yourself an 8-ounce jar of HODL butter from my friend Oshi. You can go over there to oshigood.us, oshigood.us, that's O-S-H-I good.us, and go grab yourself one of his bottles of HODL butter. What is it? Well, it starts with local hand-picked and sorted pecans straight from Southeast USA. More nuanced than a 2-hour Bitcoin podcast, this small batch craft delicacy can be enjoyed as a topping on anything edible or straight out of the reusable glass jar. He doesn't use plastic. It's got pecans ground up. That's why it's butter. It's like pecan butter, except it's got more than just pecans in it. It's got maple sugar, sea salt flakes, cinnamon, and black pepper. I mean, if you thought it would be weird to put black pepper into something like peanut butter, let's say, you would be wrong, because it gives a certain amount of umami that, brings some other flavor profiles to the table. So go over to oshigood.us. That's oshigood.us. Make sure you use the coupon code Bitcoin, and that lets Oshi know that I made the sale. So if I make a sale, Oshi gets to figure out how much that sale was worth to him, and then he cuts me in for a little bit of the proceeds on that sale. It's the value for value model of advertising here at the Circle P. Circle P is open for business. It's where I bring plebs with goods and services just like you to plebs just like you that want to buy said goods and services. Oshigood.us, Oshigood.us. Go grab some hodl butter. He also has he's also got other stuff. Sometimes he's out of stock on it, but he's got like hodl bars, which are like energy, like, snack bars, but they're like packed with dates and, energy and all kinds of stuff. He's got these things called BTHC nodes, which have a little bit of THC. They're like little chocolate candies. I think they're little pieces of hodl bars dipped in chocolate, but also have THC in them. Right now, he's out of stock of those, but he's got some bucket hats. If you want to get some swag, he's got it all, man. Go to oshigood.us. That's oshigood.us. Use Bitcoin and in the coupon code. Now, on to this one. U.S. House slips a CBDC ban into the defense spending bill. It's an interesting place to put a CBDC ban. Cal and Quinn from decrypt.co. House Republicans have added a provision banning central bank digital currencies into a 1,300-page bill, which lays out defense spending and priorities for the next financial year. The amendment, included in Bill H.R. 3838, would prohibit the Federal Reserve from testing, developing, or implementing a CBDC under any label. It adds an exception for any dollar-denominated currency that is open, permissionless, and private, and fully preserves the privacy protections of the United States coins and physical currency, end quote. Further quote, attaching our anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act to the NDAA will ensure unelected bureaucrats are never allowed to trade Americans' financial privacy for a CCP-style surveillance tool, GOP Majority Whip Tom Emmer said last month, referring to the bill. The charge to stop CBDCs in the United States is largely a Republican-led effort. Emmer himself attempted to introduce a CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act in 2023, but it failed to gain momentum. It was reintroduced upon Trump coming to office and is currently making its way through the Senate. Globally, however, CBDCs are advancing rapidly. According to the Atlantic Council, 137 countries are exploring digital versions of their currencies, up from just 35 in 2020, and with 72 already in advanced stages of development. The U.S. remains an outlier after President Trump's executive order earlier this year halting all retail CBDC work. The opposition to CBDCs in the United States reflects competing visions of the future of money. Critics of CBDC fear government overreach, surveillance, and disruption to the banking sector. The American Bankers Association, which backed the House measure in July, argued that a CBDC would fundamentally change the relationship between citizens and the Federal Reserve, undermine the important role banks play in extending credit, exacerbate economic and liquidity crises, and impede the transmission of sound monetary policy. Nanak Nihal Kalsha, if that's the way I pronounce it, co-founder of Human.Tech by Holonym, told Decrypt that he hoped the Senate bill against CBDCs passes because he feared sleepwalking into surveillance money. That's a good way to put it. Quote, the fears are definitely justified, he said. Programmable money controlled by the state. Once every transaction runs through a state ledger, privacy is gone by default. And the question isn't if it gets abused, it's when. If the United States takes a stand against CBDCs, it opens up space to build alternatives that are open, permissionless, and actually preserve privacy, the things that made digital money worth caring about in the first place, Khalsa said. Khalsa added that stablecoins issued by private companies also carried some of the same risks. Excuse me, allergies are going off a little bit today. Private companies have the same incentives to track, exclude, and monetize, he said. The only difference is who you're forced to trust, a state or a corporation. Without privacy guarantees built into the protocol itself, you're choosing which empire you want to live under. Europe-based financial nonprofit Finance Watch told Decrypt that it believed concerns about surveillance are about design, not about the concept of a CBDC itself. It is entirely possible to create a CBDC that is open, permissionless, and preserves the same privacy protections as cash. That requires privacy by design and by default, strict limits on data collection and offline functionality for small payments. The real question is whether money should be run by private companies or issued by the central bank, as with cash. They added, arguing that the digital euro being developed in the EU is being designed as a public alternative to established, privately controlled means of payment, reasserting citizens' control over money and payments. That's ridiculous. That's completely ridiculous. Just use Bitcoin. We already have the tool. We're continuously legitimizing these people's existence by continuously deferring. Is this okay? May I have some more? Is it all right if I use this? May I go to the bathroom? You know where all this started? Public schools. If you need to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. That's your human right to go relieve your bladder or empty your bowels. I know it's disgusting to talk about this early in the morning, but still, that's your right. You don't need to ask permission for that. You really don't have to ask permission. And this entirety of the last 50 years or 70 years of public school where we're taught to raise your hand to go to the bathroom is that this is what we've lost, is our ability to say, no, you don't get to give us a choice as to bad or worse. We're taking the good. We already have Bitcoin. But as long as we live with a bunch of people that still think they need to raise their hand because they need to ask permission to go to the bathroom, then we're going to have to live with the consequences of that shit. And the best way to live with the consequences of really stupid shit is to not only ignore it, but to make yourself unavailable for it to affect you. Remove yourself from the situation. I told my kids this before. If somebody, like, let's say somebody's at school, I don't know, bullying another kid, the best thing that kid could do, honestly, is to remove themselves from that situation. Don't get around that person. If you see that person, just ignore them as much as possible. Does that mean the bullying will stop? No, but you end up with a lot more control over yourself than if you constantly think that you somehow or another have to engage with this person. You don't have to engage with this person. If the person forces it on you, that's a deal. But you're not in any way, shape, format, or fashion required to actually put yourself into a situation when you don't have to. If you don't have to be in the presence of the bully, then don't. I mean, unless that person is where you actually want to be, then you're going to have to risk it. But if that person is just, I don't know, there, and you can just not be where that person's at, well, then that's where you should probably be. And that extends to things like this. I'm not going to plan on using Tether, especially after the United States starts really saying, okay, well, now we're going to regulate it. I'm not going to be using a CBDC. I mean, you might go, well, yeah, you're going to have to pay your bills. At that point, that triggers things in my head. Do I really need to live the way that somebody else thinks that I need to live? What if I did want to go off grid? And then you'll say, oh, well, you're going to have to buy a property and they're not going to accept. You don't know that. You don't know what they'll accept. You don't know who I might buy the property from. Why is it always an assumption that I've got to buy it from the United States government when almost all sales are private in the United States? So there's that. And then you'll say, well, you're going to have to pay your property taxes in a United States CBDC because eventually we'll get one. Really? What if I hire a third party firm to do it for me, and I just actually use Bitcoin, and then I give them Bitcoin, and they take care of everything else, so I don't have to interact with this poison. See, I mean, it doesn't mean that I have all the answers, and I don't. I have probably just a few answers, but I'm not going to put myself in a position where I have to interact with this bully, where I have to interact with this bullshit. I don't know, man. I get the feeling, it just struck me that I'll probably be alive long enough to see a lot of the powers of the state be stripped away, because the citizenry of the world, I think, is just almost there. We're almost tired of it, to the point that we might actually do something about it. Who knows? Let's run the numbers. Futures and commodities, and while everybody else is having fun, oil is basically doing nothing. Energy sector is basically flat. West Texas Intermediate is up, like a fifth of a point. Brent North Sea is basically sideways. Natural gas is making the only move, but it's 3.5% into the red. Gasoline is up 0.14%. And oh, wow, this is an interesting addition. Murban crude has been added to energy futures on CNBC.com. I've never heard of Murban crude. This is interesting. It's trading at $70.61 per barrel after slipping 0.06% into the red. Murban crude is apparently the most expensive crude oil there is, at least as far as CNBC.com is concerned, and all your shiny metal rocks are having a really good day because they're all risky. Gold is up 1.2% to 34.22 6/9. Silver is up 2.5%. Platinum is up 1.5%. Copper is up 0.69%, and palladium is up 2.75%. Ag is almost all in the green today. Biggest loser is cotton. Note rough rice. 0.59% to the downside. Biggest winner is going to be coffee, 3.5% to the upside. Meanwhile, live cattle up 0.65%, lean hogs up 1.65%, and feeder cattle is up 0.65% as well. And then we get to the legacy financial world, the indices, the Dow, holy smokes, it's up 945 after a 2.11% bump to the upside. S&P is up 1.65%, NASDAQ is up 1.7%, and the S&P Mini is up just over 3 full percentage points. Now, 116,900 gets us back to a $2.33 trillion market cap, and we can purchase 34.6 ounces of shiny metal rocks with our one Bitcoin, of which there are 19,909,772.69 of. And average fees per block are extremely low, 0.02 BTC, taken in fees on a per block basis. There's about 35 blocks carrying 125,000 unconfirmed transactions waiting to clear at high priority rates of 1 Satoshi per VByte. Low priority is going to get you in at 1 Satoshi per VByte. And we are at 941 exahashes per second. So hash rate on the mining side of Bitcoin is coming back up from its yesterday's 927 exahashes per second. And from all my children, at least I think it's from all my children, which was yesterday's episode of Bitcoin, and I got a Regalicky, says Regalicky, and gives me 100 sats for it. There's an, oh, good Lord, there's a unresolved npub number here, so I don't know who it is, but it's 250 sats, says VPN into the UK, VPN out of the UK, use internet freely. You too can tell the UK government to fuck off. 1776 with 1776 sats says Bitcoin Policy Institute UK has unwittingly created a tool that makes it easy for UK Bitcoiners to put themselves on the map for tax authorities' future draconian measures, complete with full name and postal code that can be referenced to the individual through past tax returns. I'm sorry, but all of us, including the UK, need to get it through our heads that engaging these psychopathic socialist leaders isn't going to do squat. Does anyone really think that the international banking cartels are going to permit anything that threatens their control in any form other than a watered-down version that keeps the masses in their paddocks? You might want to listen to the wisdom there of 1776, man, because that's a different way of looking at it. I mean, you're not giving your address, but if you do give your full name and your postal code, that's some granularity that can be used. It could be used. Now the question becomes, what happens if you use a fake name? And what other information goes along with that send? Is it your MAC address on the phone or your MAC on your phone? Does the machine address code go along with it? Because that can definitely be tied to the owner of the phone through AT&T or any of the people that actually sell, unless it's a burner phone, in which case that's a different deal. But if it's like, if you've got an iPhone and you bought it through whoever services your telephone in the UK, there's a MAC address that's tied to that. So just, be aware. Cousin Vinny with 210 says, I can't stop thinking of all the details of how fucking awesome the cathedral could be. Thanks for the mind splinter. Yeah, it's a bit of a mind virus. I will give it that. Permanerd with 1,000 says, please listen to these cathedral episodes of Bitcoin and learn how stacking functions and not just sats creates an ecosystem of symbiosis and minimizes overall workload like an abundance of honey locust pods making a mess on your property. The problem is the solution. Pies with 121 says, thank you, sir. No, thank you. Fountain with 500 says, nothing. Psyduck with 749 says, Psyduck. That's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news you can use. Cooler.chat was dropped sometime either late last night or early this morning. I think it was late last night. And you may be asking yourself, what is Cooler.chat? Well, first of all, it's nostr, or it's part of the nostr ecosystem. So Cooler would be spelled COOLR, not ER, but COOLR.chat. And it's essentially, it looks exactly like BitChat, which in turn looks exactly like the IRC chats of old. The thing with Cooler.chat is that it seems to be a way to connect with the BitChat community just through a browser. You don't actually do it through BitChat. Now, I'm still looking into this, and I may be wrong about that, but I don't think I am, because it seems to be that for those of you who were around in the old days of IRC or Internet Relay Chat, BitChat looks a lot like IRC, which has been said. And then we've got Cooler.chat, and it actually uses nostr relays. And since BitChat, one of the upgrades to BitChat was that, hey, if you're within like the Bluetooth range of the other person with BitChat, then Bluetooth is basically doing all that. And if your mesh network is wide enough, then the chat that of the people that, if you're talking to just people that are within that particular mesh network of Bluetooth, well, then your Bluetooth is taking that over. However, Jack Dorsey introduced the ability for BitChat to reach out to the internet and use nostr relays to bounce messages to people that were no longer in your mesh network Bluetooth chat. So now BitChat is reaching out to the wider internet. And yesterday or the day before, Jack Dorsey introduced geocaching hashtags so that you could look at chats that are happening in your area, like, I don't know, hashtag Atlanta or whatever, right? So this cooler.chat seems to be able to tap into that. So if you're interested, you can actually log in with your npub extension, which foolishly I did last night, and I can't prove it, but I think that's how I lost well over half of the people that I follow. I know. There's places that I can go to restore that. I've tried them all, and nothing is restored. Like my other, I think I was following around 2,500 people. I've got like 940 of them left, and 50 of those I actually had to go refollow this morning. If I was following you on nostr, and I'm no longer following you on nostr, then reach out to me on nostr. Either just hit me up directly, not through a DM, but hit me up through just like, saying, hey, you're not following me anymore, and make sure that you put in like at NunyaBidness so that I see it, or reply to one of my, notes or something like that, just so that I have a chance to add you back into my follow list. If I stopped following you, this is the reason why. It's not because I got mad and you said something and I stopped following you because you're a dork. No. I love my dorks. I'm not going to stop following you because you're dorky. I'm just saying, I think that when I logged in to cooler.chat, I have always noticed, and I've always warned against this, don't use your main npub to do things like this. And I went exactly against my own advice, and we all do that. And I've paid, and I've paid dearly, because I've lost, like, I don't know, probably 1,700 followers or follows that I'm now going to be missing from my feed. So, but still, cooler.chat is something you should check out. But just a reminder, whenever it is that you try a new nostr client, even if it's something like that's more attuned to BitChat than it is what we're used to in nostr, and if it's using your npub and your nsec and you're logging in with an extension, if it's new, remember, its relay set is probably going to be very different than what your relay set is. And this is the problem. So when I log into this and it's like giving me like 2 like relays, and I've never been on those relays before, that's what I think happens to my follower list. Like when I'm following somebody, I lose that person because the relays that when I log into a new chat or a new nostr client and it's not using enough of the relays that I already use, I think that that's where I run the risk of losing the people that I follow. So I like I said, I don't know if that's what happened, but cooler.chat, COOLR.chat, probably something that you want to go look at if you're interested in what's going on with BitChat. Now, on that, somebody has released bitchat-world-view.vercel.app. So it's Vercel, so it's kind of like they're just working on it. But this is tied to the BitChat geo-hashing system that Jack installed and dropped like either yesterday or the day before. So I can look, it's got like, it shows me the chat, and it shows me the chat rooms, just like I would see on the new version of BitChat. But this one's got a map. And if I click onto the map, I can zoom in and I can say, wow, there's 5 people. There's 5 people. Where are they? There's 5 people kind of northwest of Spokane that are on BitChat, which it looks to me like they're out in the middle of freaking nowhere. They're over there by, what river is that? They're over. For those of you that are west of Spokane on the Spokane River, I'm looking at you right now. This is what I mean. This could probably get us into trouble. There's one person in Portland, one measly person in Portland, but there's like 140 in St. Louis. which that's where Roya lives. Let's see, there's one person in Tulsa. Looks like there may be 13 people in the Sinaloa drug cartel down there below Ciudad Juarez. Let's see, there's a whole bunch of people in Austin. Yep, which I would expect. But the deal is that now when I click that, if I click one of those things, it takes me one of those little bubbles that's on the map. I can go and I can look at their chat. So I'm going to go up here to the guys in Spokane, and somebody's saying test, somebody else is saying, hey, sup y'all, yo, what up? not a very interesting chat. But now we've got a visual cue of where people that are using BitChat are. This, like, what 1776 was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that mapping where you are using BitChat is good either. Just be careful with this stuff, right? Especially because we're all like, this is all brand new. But what I want to really iterate here is that the amount of tooling that's going on around BitChat that isn't being done by Jack Dorsey or any of his team, because it's a private project just for that Jack did by himself, is amazing. That people are so enamored with BitChat that they are starting to build ancillary tools, and the ecosystem is starting to take off. So how far does it go? I don't know, but it's going to be fun to watch. I'll give it that. So now let's get back to the news. Coinbase tightening its workforce security after North Korea remote worker threats. Zoltan Vardai, Cointelegraph. Coinbase, the world's third largest cryptocurrency exchange by volume, has come under a wave of threats from North Korean hackers seeking remote employment with the company. They're trying to infiltrate Naked Mole Rat's outfit. North Korean IT workers are increasingly targeting Coinbase's remote worker policy to gain access to its very sensitive systems. In response, Coinbase CEO Naked Mole Rat is rethinking the crypto exchange's internal security measures, including requiring all workers to receive in-person training in the United States, while people with access to sensitive systems will be required to hold U.S. citizenship and submit to fingerprinting. Quote, DPRK is very interested in stealing crypto, Armstrong told Cheeky Pint podcast host John Collins in a Thursday episode. Quote, we can collaborate with law enforcement, but it feels like there's 500 new people graduating every quarter from some kind of school they have, and that's their whole job, end quote. He added that some operatives are coerced into working for the regime. Quote, in many of these cases, it's not the individual person's fault. Their family is being coerced or detained if they don't cooperate, said Armstrong. Armstrong's comments come amid a wave of rising North Korean cyber activity beyond Coinbase. In June, 4 North Korean operatives infiltrated multiple crypto firms as freelance developers, stealing a cumulative $900,000 from these startups, Cointelegraph reported. Armstrong's new measures comes 3 months after the exchange confirmed that less than 1% of its transacting monthly users were affected by a data breach, which may cost the exchange up to $400 million in reimbursement expenses, Cointelegraph reported on May the 15th. However, the human cost of this data breach may be much higher for users, according to Michael Arrington, the founder of TechCrunch and Arrington Capital, who highlighted that the breach included home addresses and account balances, leading to potential physical attacks. Among all United States crypto firms, the Coinbase brand was the most impersonated in phishing attacks in 2024, fraudulently used across 416 reported phishing scams in the 4 previous years, according to MailSuite report that was shared with Cointelegraph. Accounting for all U.S. brands, Facebook's parent company Meta was the most impersonated brand by scammers, appearing in at least 10,500 reported scam incidents during the past 4 years. The United States Internal Revenue Service was the second on the list, having been impersonated in at least 9,762 scams. So North Korea targeting gaining employment with crypto firms, and it looks like Brian Armstrong's Coinbase is highest on the list. That's interesting. That's a very interesting way to go. We want to be hired by you so that we can gain better access, and it makes a lot of sense. But wow, I guess Brian Armstrong is going to have to really rethink his policies. Anyway, okay. So I was talking to a guy named Vance Crowe the other day. Vance, if you're listening, how you doing, pal? He suggested something, which is why I brought you Texas Slim as a nostr personality that you should probably be looking at and following. Today is Vance Crowe, and you can find Vance Crowe on nostr. Void stares back. There's nostr gets confusing for some people, depending on what client you're using, depending on that client's search function. Sometimes if you type in Vance, you'll see, Bert from Bert and Ernie. If you were a fan of Sesame Street, if you don't know what Bert looks like, just type in Bert and Ernie, and he's the yellow guy with the cone looking head. That's the npub, or that's the PFP that you'd be looking for with Vance or Void Stares Back. And like I said, the search functions can be different. Sometimes you would actually have to look and search for Void Stares Back. Sometimes you can search for Vance and Bert will show up. And sometimes you actually have to type in Vance Crowe, Crowe. But Vance is he started this thing called Legacy Interviews. And what he does is he gets hired by people to interview their grandparents or their parents or their sons and daughters or their brothers and sisters, their family members. That's why it's legacyinterviews.com. What he's doing is what he's able to do is he's able to capture a record of this person's life, events in this person's life that maybe they wouldn't, necessarily remember to share with their son or daughter or somebody else in their family. And this is a way to capture the history of somebody who's probably just as interesting as Winston Churchill. It doesn't matter who we are. We're all humans and we all have the same potential. So Vance is a really good follow. And he talks about nostr on interviews. He is a Bitcoiner, and he talks about Bitcoin on interviews when he's on several different podcasts. And so because of that, this is somebody that you probably want to follow. That and the fact that he's knee deep into ag, and I won't get into his background. He can share that with you if you ask him, but he is knee deep into agriculture. And as you know, if you've listened to me for any length of time whatsoever, I have a great deal of interest in what's going on in agriculture. Also, I just want to make mention of njump.me, njump.me. If you're listening to me and you've been thinking about getting on nostr, but you don't know where to start there. It'll take you through a chain, literally, it'll take you through a tutorial. Like you do this step and then you do this step. And when you get to the end and it takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do, you will end up with your own nostr account, your own NSEC, your own npub. You'll understand what those are. And it doesn't take any time at all. You'll be set up and you'll be rocking and rolling with nostr at njump.me. That's njump.me, njump.me. Go there, get on nostr, get off of X, man. Psychologically, it's just pummeling you and it's not healthy. Although we are going to talk about something that may not be healthy for the Philippines, or it may be. It depends on if they're full of shit or not. A Philippine bill is charting the path to creation of a strategic Bitcoin reserve holding 10,000 Bitcoin. Yeah, we'll see. Ezra Reguera, Cointelegraph. The Congress of the Philippines is weighing a proposal that could see the country's central bank establish a strategic reserve of 10,000 Bitcoin, positioning the country among the first in Southeast Asia to adopt Bitcoin as a strategic asset. A House of Representatives bill filed by I can't pronounce it. There's no way. In June, made headlines on Thursday as it aims to mandate the Banco Central in Filipinas, the country's central bank, to purchase 2,000 Bitcoin annually over a 5-year period. The bill, called the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act, aims to mandate the BSP, I guess the Philippine Central Bank, to buy 10,000 Bitcoin worth $1.1 billion at current market prices. The bill states that the asset would be locked in a trust for 20 years at least, and this would mean that the coins could not be sold, swapped, or disposed of except for when retiring government debt. Quote, this representation deems it vital that the Philippines stockpile strategic assets such as Bitcoin to serve important national interests, such as providing financial stability, among others. Villafuerte wrote, adding that it's imperative for Congress to write new laws aimed at diversifying the country's assets to ensure financial security. Yay! Well, the lawmaker described Bitcoin as digital gold, citing its annual growth rate of 40% over the last 5 years and its recent all-time high. He said the Philippines must, quote, cash in on the increasing role of crypto in global markets, pointing towards El Salvador and other nations already exploring and implementing Bitcoin reserve strategies. The Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act would mandate that the central bank implement a Bitcoin purchase program. It would mandate that the central bank hold the asset for a minimum of 20 years. It would also require the central bank to have a proof of reserve system. This would compel the central bank governor to provide publicly available quarterly reports on the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve that include information on holdings, transactions, and control of public and private, transactions and control of private keys. If approved, the bill could push the Philippines above El Salvador and near Bhutan in Bitcoin holdings. El Salvador, a country that buys Bitcoin daily, has a mere 6,276 Bitcoin. Meanwhile, the royal government of Bhutan has around 10,565, worth nearly $1.2 billion, according to Arkham Intelligence. So this would be nice if they do it, but anybody can talk a big game, especially if it's going to give you enough of a boost and you don't actually have to execute on it. Then sure, you'll say anything it takes. And right now, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, whether for country or business, all you have to do is say it. You don't have to execute it. You just have to say it. And in most cases, you're going to get something out of it. And that's what's saddening about the entire thing. But there was something here that really, really kind of got me thinking in this particular one. Where is it? Hold on. Let me see if I can do it this way. Yes, here we go. This would mean that the coins could not be sold. They're talking about locking it into trust for 20 years, right? This would mean that the coins could not be sold, swapped, or disposed of, except for when retiring government debt. And this gets us back into a completely different discussion than just Bitcoin. I'm not talking about the fact that they would sell it to retire government debt. I'm talking about the fact that they speak of it so nonchalantly. Well, there's only one particular case that we would actually, do this for, and that would be to get rid of our debt. Well, why did you have the debt in the first place? See, every government is in debt. And at this point, people are starting to ask the question, who are we in debt to? Like if we just look at the United States and we ask the question becomes asked, but who owns our debt? That's an easy answer. Anybody that owns a United States Treasury bill. That's who the United States owes money to. That's how we get our money from other countries. We issue debt instrumentation. In this case, the form takes Treasury bills. So China buys a whole bunch of treasury bills. Well, they own that debt. We are indebted to the instrumentation that we created, and the fact that China bought those particular boxfuls of debt is not as much to do about China as the fact that it doesn't matter who holds it. All these countries buy United States Treasury bills. So when you ask the question, who owns the debt? Who is the United States indebted to? It's any country that bought United States Treasury bills. But there's more. We also owe, the United States owes any company that holds Treasury bills on their balance sheets. If a company like AT&T has $1 billion worth of Treasury bills from the United States, then the United States owes AT&T $1 billion. It gets better. Retail, me and you, I can go buy a Treasury bill if I wanted to. I could call my broker and say, hey, I want to put this much money, let's say $10,000 into the Treasury markets. And they say, sure. What do you want? Short, medium, long term? And I say, well, we'll do a mix of 2-year, 5-year, or 2-year, 10-year, and 30-year. Okay. Now the United States government owes me because I own the Treasury or the debt instrumentation. So the next time somebody asks you the question, if you're talking about United States debt, and they say, yeah, but who do we owe it to? You have your answer. We owe it to anybody that holds a United States Treasury bill. That's how it works. Just wanted to clear that up. Also, a reminder here, the Comfrey Owner's Manual is here. Go find it at thebitcoinandshow.com. If you've ever heard me talk about Comfrey and you want to know where to get it from, you want to know how to plan it, you want to know how to divide it, and you want to know what you can do with it once you start growing it, well, then you need to go to bitcoinandshow.com and sign up with your email. Doesn't cost you nothing, but I do want your email in return for, it's an owner's manual of Comfrey. And it's not short. It's not, but it's also not so long that you don't want to read it. It's like, it's a good informational brochure, right? And it tells you everything you need to do from making liquid fertilizer out of Comfrey to making mulch out of Comfrey to planting it, to dividing it, to scaling it, to do whatever it is that you want to do with it. It's all in the guide. Go find it at bitcoinandshow.com/the Comfrey Owner's Manual is here. And there's hyphens in between those. So bitcoinandshow.com, just go to bitcoinandshow.com. And if you want to, just use a little search button up at the top left and type in Comfrey, you will find it. Find it and sign up for it, and you will get it as a PDF. And you'll know exactly what to do with Comfrey, and you'll know exactly where to buy it, and you'll know exactly what it's capable of doing, from healing wounds to making the best compost, to making liquid fertilizer. And I mean all by itself. You don't have to add anything into it. It's just nothing but comfrey leaves. You make comfrey extract, which is like extra heavy duty potency fertilizer, all from Comfrey, because Comfrey's got it all. It's got the nitrogen, it's got potassium, it's got the magnesium, it's got the molybdenum, it's got everything in it. It's got macronutrients and micronutrients. Comfrey is all you need. It digs deep into the ground. It pulls minerals and stuff that have been locked away for centuries, and it pulls it up to the surface where you can actually use it to feed other plants with. This stuff is amazing. It also heals wounds, but we won't get into it right now. Go to bitcoinandshow.com. That's bitcoinandshow.com, and I will see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.